Hey guys, welcome back to 9180. So I took vacation yesterday and today with the intention of getting some projects done at the flip house. But yesterday we had tornadic thunderstorms and today has been left too muddy to get anything done outside. So here I am in my tiny house with all this time on my hands, and I thought, why not use this opportunity to talk with you about something I've been meaning to share for a while now. In fact, it should have been one of the first videos that I did, but better late than never, right? So, I've been obsessed with home improvement projects since before I was even in high school. I know that probably sounds odd, but when I grew up, I wanted to be Candace Olsen, and I don't know what kind of shows other kids my age were watching, but my favorite show was Design on a Dime. I don't know if anyone remembers that show, but it was a total classic. And even today, I'm still obsessed with any show that has to do with buying, selling, designing, renovating, and of course, flipping houses. But the one thing that all of those shows have in common is that none of them give any amount of time or attention towards educating their viewers about the upfront costs associated with buying a house. In these shows, when someone finds the home of their dreams, or like in the case of my most recent purchase, the home of their nightmares, they submit an offer, and sometimes it'll show a bit of negotiating back and forth, but then poof, they own a house. And well, there's just a little bit more to it than that. And I really feel like these shows create an unrealistic view of what the process is really like to purchase a home. And it's just one reason why so many first-time home buyers are caught off guard by the amount of cash that has to come from their own pockets. So today, I'm going to tell you what they don't tell you. Whether you're purchasing a home or an investment property, there will always be out-of-pocket expenses that cannot be rolled in to your loan. Now, these costs are going to vary greatly depending on things like what type of loan you choose or what type of loan you're qualified for, and also how well the negotiation process goes. But there's also going to be costs that are relatively the same no matter what. It's kind of like when you do an experiment. You've got your constants and you've got your variables. And we're going to look at both. And the best way I know to do that is to show you the differences and similarities between the two home purchases that my husband and I have made. Now, these are two very different houses, very different scenarios, and very different upfront costs. Our first home was practically new construction. It was only 5 years old. We were only the second couple to live there. It was a nice middle-sized house, 3-bedroom, 2 baths, 2-car garage. It had a gas fireplace, a fenced-in yard. It was located across from a cul-de-sac. Yeah, it was a little cookie cutter, but it was also idyllic. And the most important difference was that it was completely move-in ready. The only thing we had to do before moving our furniture in was steam clean the carpets. So the Little House of Horrors is a little bit different than that, as you've seen. It is almost 70 years old, a bit smaller, 3-bedroom, 1 bath, no garage, no fireplace, no fenced-in yard yet, but it does have unique vintage characteristics that we're going to maintain, so it's not cookie cutter, but it's also very much not move-in ready either. And you might think that the nicer, newer, bigger, more expensive home would have higher upfront costs than the older, smaller, cheaper house that's falling apart. But for us at least, that was not the case, and I'll show you why in a minute. But first, when I tell you about upfront costs, your mind probably goes straight to closing costs. And that is something we're going to discuss, but it's important for you to know that your out-of-pocket expenses start at the very beginning, well before your closing date. In fact, there are two things you have to have before you can even submit an offer. Well, I take that back. You can probably submit an offer without these two things, but nobody's actually going to look at your offer or take you seriously without them. The first is a pre-approval letter from your lender that says you can actually afford to buy this house. And the second is $500 in earnest money. Now, getting a pre-approval letter, it takes a little more than just filling out a loan application and having them run your credit, because you're not buying a car, you're buying a house. But you do have to fill out a loan application and they will run your credit, and ultimately you will pay a fee of $30, or at least that was our fee both times, for them to run the credit. And you're probably thinking, that is so minimal, why is she even writing that down? But it all adds up in the end. So like I said, the lender's going to require more from you before you can get that piece of paper. And if you have a pen and paper, I suggest you write down this list. I think it would be smart if you would gather up all of these documents before you even go to the lender, because they are going to ask for them, and it'll just be a lot less stressful for you if you're prepared and you have them available. So if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and give you that list of what the lender is going to ask for. They are going to ask for the 2 most recent tax returns, your 2 most recent W-2s, your most recent pay stubs, probably 2 months worth, your most recent bank statements, probably 2 months worth, and if you have a 401k account, they will likely ask for your most recent retirement statements, again, probably 2 months worth. And all of this just to get a little piece of paper so that you can submit your offer. But the other thing I mentioned that you're going to need is $500 in earnest money, or at least that's what we paid with both of our purchases. And I'm talking to my fellow 918ers here because I don't actually know what it's like in other parts of the country. But I'm going to write down $500 for both of these. The next cost comes in the form of the inspection, if you so choose to have an inspection, and if your loan type requires an inspection. Now with our first home, it was only 5 years old. We weren't really expecting there to be any problems. We probably wouldn't have had an inspection done, honestly. But we went with the USDA loan, and the USDA loan requires 2 inspections. It requires just your regular home inspection and also a termite inspection. And so we shopped around and we found a guy that was willing to do the home inspection for $150, and then I think the termite inspection was another $100. So that came to be $250, I believe. Now with our rehab loan for the Little House of Horrors, surprisingly, they didn't actually require an inspection. And honestly, we had kind of already guessed everything that was wrong with the house, which was everything. But when you're dealing with such a scary house, it never hurts to have an experienced professional look behind the walls, look under the house, just make sure there's no hidden horrors that you can't see. And Dwayne Anderson did a really great job of educating us on all of the issues, and there were a lot. And one day I'll have to tell you the story of just how bad the inspection went, because I almost ran for the hills. But that inspection cost us $300 for the Little House of Horrors. So let's assume that you don't run for the hills. The next cost will come in the form of the appraisal fee, and for us that was $500 for both houses. Now the lender orders an appraisal mostly to protect themselves. They don't want to risk lending you more money than what the house is worth, or in the case of our rehab, more money than what the house will be worth after the renovation. But the appraisal also protects you as the buyer because you don't want to pay more money than what the house is worth either. So it's really actually a good thing. Now, I don't know how well you can actually see my board, but so far the costs are quite similar. These would be what I call the constants. Now let's talk about the variables. So your loan type is going to greatly affect your out-of-pocket expenses. Once upon a time, before the real estate crash and before the credit crisis that followed, the most common and conventional home loan required 20% down. Now let's just pretend that we were putting 20% down on our first home. That would have been roughly $25,000. Let's pretend we were putting 20% down on the Little House of Horrors. That would have been $16,000. But luckily today, there are all kinds of loan options that require little to no down payment. And I don't know what all of them are, but I do know about some of them. The first-time home buyers loan is 100% financing, and it's for people with good credit and a healthy debt-to-income ratio. There's the VA loan, which is 0% down. It's for veterans and military. There is the FHA loan. I believe you don't have to have the best credit for that one. And it requires, I think, 3.5% down. But they are more picky about the type of house you can buy. For example, you could never buy the Little House of Horrors with an FHA loan because they're going to require inspections, and if they don't like what they see, they're going to make you walk away from the house. Now, our first home was on the edge of Owasso, where Owasso and Collinsville meet. It was near an intersection known as German Corner. And this is not a rural area at all, but on a map it technically qualified as rural development, and so we were able to get the USDA loan, which is 0% down. So I'm going to write a big fat 0. Now, with the Little House of Horrors, we knew this was not a lipstick flip. A lipstick flip is what our realtor, Sherry McLean, calls a house that just needs paint, flooring, new cabinets, new light fixtures. Lipstick. The Little House of Horrors is not a lipstick flip. We knew it was going to require an intense and costly renovation, inside and out, upside and down. And so we opted for a rehab loan, which is where the renovation is included into the mortgage, or the renovation budget is included in the mortgage. And there are two that we were told about. Now, let's say Randy and I had a primary residence, and this was just a secondary investment property that we never planned to live in ourselves. We would have to put 20% down. We'd have to put that $16,000 that we talked about. But because of our unique situation, once the renovation is complete, we are going to move into the house, and it's going to be our primary residence until the house sells. And because of that, we were able to qualify for the 5% down rehab loan. So instead of $16,000, we paid $4,000. Okay. Now, I told you that the negotiation process can really affect your out-of-pocket expenses. Now, in the TV shows, when people are negotiating back and forth, it usually has to do with the purchase price. And sometimes it's important to try to get that purchase price down, especially if you don't think the house is valued at what they're asking. But when it came to our first home, it was already listed well below any of the houses around it. So we knew it was going to have no problem appraising. And we were approved for quite a bit higher than what they were asking. So we weren't really worried about negotiating the purchase price. We were worried about out-of-pocket expenses. We had an entire house to furnish. We had to buy a couch, a love seat, a coffee table, end tables, a big screen TV for Randy, a TV stand, a dining room set so I could host Thanksgiving and Christmas. We had to get a bedroom set, a guest bed, a computer desk for the office, and everything else that makes a house a home. So we didn't want to spend any more out of pocket than we already were. So with our first home, we offered full asking and asked the sellers to pay the majority of the closing costs. They came back and said that because they had priced the house so low, they wouldn't be able to afford to pay as much of the closing cost as we wanted. So what we did was we offered just above asking, which was still lower than anything else around, and they then agreed to pay the majority of the closing costs. Now, we were told we were still going to need to bring $900 to the table on closing day. So we went and got a cashier's check for $900, and then, much to our surprise, when we got to the closing, they told us there had been some kind of miscalculation or something, and we actually didn't owe that much. It was only like something crazy, like $10 or $20 or something like that. And I can't remember the exact number, but it was under 50. So I'm going to write 50 down. Now, with the Little House of Horrors, we already knew that the purchase price was well below anything else in the area and that the sellers were likely not going to budge. So we tried a very similar strategy. We offered full price and asked for them to pay some of the closing costs. But they came back and told us that because the price was so low, they were not going to pay any of the closing costs. So we didn't get so lucky there. And even though your credit check, your earnest money, and your appraisal are all part of the closing costs, in the end, we still ended up on closing day paying $4,400. All right, lastly, appliances. Now, in Oklahoma, and I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country, but in Oklahoma, it is never to be expected that the refrigerator, washer, or dryer will be included in the sale of a home. Now, it's a great asset if you're selling a house to say all appliances included, but you should never expect it. And like I said, I listed off all that stuff Randy and I had to buy to furnish our home, and we didn't want to have to buy new appliances either, so we asked for them to leave the appliances in the home. And at first, they agreed. And then they changed their minds. They found out that we qualified for the $8,000 tax credit that was being given to first-time home buyers that year, and decided that we no longer deserved to have their appliances. And we thought that wasn't very fair that they changed their minds, and they thought it wasn't very fair that we wanted their appliances, and both realtors wanted their clients to be happy. And our realtor, Sherry McLean, is a total rock star. She talked to the other realtor, and they both agreed to forfeit $500 from their own commission, which gave Randy and I a $1,000 tax or $1,000 credit to purchase appliances with. So it really worked out because the sellers got to keep their appliances and we got to go shopping for brand new, better appliances. And we picked out a really nice refrigerator and a really nice washer and dryer. And so the $1,000 didn't fully pay it all. We still ended up paying about $600 out of pocket for appliances. Now the funny thing about refrigerators not usually being included is that in the Little House of Horrors, it was the refrigerator that was the only appliance that was left behind. But we donated that refrigerator to Habitat for Humanity, and we're going to be buying all new appliances, and we've got a budget of about $1,500 for that. We're not going to go high end, but we are going to do stainless steel. But I'm not going to write $1,500 down here because it's not an out-of-pocket expense, because it's part of our renovation budget that has been included into the mortgage. So now that we've got everything written down, I better write a big fat 0 by the appliances for the Little House of Horrors. Okay, now we've got everything written down. And I'm going to tally it all up. I work for an accounting firm, but I'm not an accountant, so this might take me a second. Oh, man.